Hey everyone, welcome back. So today we're going to deep dive into what's happening with the US and Ukraine. Big story developing right now.
Absolutely.
We got two articles, both talking about Trump halting military aid to Ukraine.
Right.
And there's this crazy story about a confrontation in the Oval Office between Trump and Zelenskyy that happened just before the aid was frozen.
Oh, wow.
So the US has given Ukraine a ton of support, billions in aid since Russia invaded 3 years ago.
Yeah, a lot of support.
But now it seems like Trump wants to go in a totally different direction.
Seems that way, yeah.
One of the articles goes into detail about Trump putting a stop to all the military aid.
Oh.
And there's this quote from someone at the White House saying that they're reviewing the aid to make sure it's contributing to peace.
Interesting.
So what do you think about that statement?
Well, I mean, it sounds reasonable, right?
Oh.
Wanting the aid to contribute to peace.
Sure.
But you have to look at what else is going on.
Like what?
Like Trump has been publicly criticizing Zelenskyy.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh, right. Yeah.
Saying that Ukraine should be more grateful and accusing him of not wanting peace.
Right.
And then Trump even went on his Truth Social and criticized a statement Zelenskyy made.
Which statement?
About the war being very, very far away from ending.
Oh, yeah?
So it seems like there's more to it.
Definitely, yeah. So let's go back a bit and talk about this clash in the Oval Office.
Yeah, that sounds intense.
The article describes a huge confrontation between Trump Vice President Vance and Zelenskyy.
Huh.
It was supposed to be a meeting about a mineral rights deal.
Okay.
But somehow it turned into a big argument.
Oh, wow.
Vance apparently said that Zelenskyy was being disrespectful to Trump.
Oh, my gosh.
And that's when things got heated.
Really?
There's a quote from Trump saying that Zelenskyy is gambling with millions of lives.
Wow.
And that Zelensky's gambling with World War III.
Oh, gosh.
And that he's not ready for peace.
Hmm.
So do we know why it got so out of control so fast? Was there something going on behind the scenes?
Yeah, it seems like tensions had been building for weeks. Trump had been saying some pretty critical things about Zelenskyy.
Like what?
He even called him a dictator, which is just not true.
Right.
And he's been blaming Ukraine for Russia's invasion.
Oh, wow.
This is a big change from how the U.S. has talked about the conflict before.
Yeah, a huge shift.
Yeah.
So how has Zelenskyy reacted to all of this?
He's been pretty outspoken.
Has he?
Yeah. He's publicly asked for more truth from the Trump administration.
Okay.
And he accused Trump of being trapped in a web of disinformation.
Wow. So he's not just letting it slide.
No, he's pushing back.
So one thing that really gets me is that the U.S. went ahead and had ceasefire talks with Russia.
Right.
But they didn't include Ukraine.
I know.
So what does that even mean for Ukraine to be left out of these crucial talks?
That's a big question. Can there be a real peace if Ukraine isn't even at the table?
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering.
And what kind of message does that send to Ukraine
Yeah.
and to their allies about how committed the U.S. really is to their independence?
Really makes you think. So amidst all this tension, they were supposed to be talking about this mineral rights deal.
Yeah, that's right.
What can you tell us about that deal?
Well, the Trump administration wants access to Ukraine's mineral resources really badly.
Okay.
They see it as a way to get back some of the billions the U.S. has spent on aid to Ukraine.
So basically they're looking at it like an investment.
Kind of like that, yeah.
Interesting. Is that even normal for a country to expect to make money off of foreign aid like that?
Not really. Usually foreign aid is seen as a diplomatic tool.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you
Yeah.
use it to build relationships and promote stability.
Yeah.
It's not usually about getting a direct financial return.
Right.
So this whole thing about recouping costs, well, it makes you wonder about the motivation behind the U.S. aid now.
Yeah.
Is it really about helping Ukraine be stable and independent?
Right.
Or is it more about getting something back?
That's a good question. It seems like there's a lot more to this situation than meets the eye.
There definitely is.
It's kind of hard to know where to even begin with all of this.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Maybe it would help to look back at how the U.S. and Ukraine have interacted in the past.
That's a good idea.
You know, historically, what's
Yeah.
the relationship been like?
Well, the U.S. has been a consistent supporter of Ukraine,
Yeah.
especially since Russia took over Crimea in 2014.
Right.
That aid has been really important in helping Ukraine build up its defenses
Yeah.
and to deter Russia from doing more.
So this change under Trump is a pretty big departure from that.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
It goes against how both Democrats and Republicans have approached Ukraine for a long time.
For decades, even.
Yeah.
So going back to this minerals deal,
Yeah.
what could be the good and bad things for both the U.S. and Ukraine? What kind of minerals are we even talking about?
Well, Ukraine has a lot of iron ore, titanium, and lithium.
Okay.
All valuable stuff.
Right.
The U.S. wants access to these resources so they don't have to depend on other countries for important materials.
So it seems like it could be good for the U.S.
Yeah, potentially.
But what about Ukraine? How do they feel about the deal?
That's where it gets tricky.
How so?
I mean, yeah, there's potential for Ukraine to make money.
Yeah.
But there are also worries about the environment.
Like what?
Well, more mining could cause more damage to the environment.
Right.
And some people say the deal could make Ukraine too reliant on the U.S.,
Yeah.
which could weaken their independence.
Oh, I see.
And, of course, the whole political climate right now.
Yeah, or with all the tension.
Exactly.
Makes it really tough to even think about making a deal.
Yeah, it's complicated.
So we've got this conflict.
Right.
The aid's been frozen.
Uh-huh.
And now this controversial mineral deal is hanging in the balance.
Yeah, it's a lot to unpack.
It really is. It's hard to know what to make of it all.
It's a lot.
But here's what I think.
What's that?
I think what we're seeing is a huge change in how the U.S. is doing foreign policy under Trump.
Yeah, definitely.
And that could have big consequences, not just for the war in Ukraine,
Right.
but for how countries interact all over the world.
Absolutely. And for the U.S.'s role on the global stage,
It's a lot to process.
it really is.
So before we take a break,
Okay.
what are some things our listeners should be thinking about as we continue to explore this situation?
Well, I think the biggest question is, what will happen because of what Trump is doing?
Like what kind of things?
Well, how will this affect the people in Ukraine who need U.S. aid to survive?
Yeah, that's a good question.
And what message does this send to Russia?
Uh-huh.
And how might all this change how the U.S. gets along with its allies?
Great questions. We'll be right back to dig deeper into all of that.
Sounds good.
News Talk on Samar News, your go-to podcast for the latest headlines and in-depth discussions. Join us as we unravel the stories that matter most, bringing you insightful commentary and expert analysis. Tune in for thought-provoking conversations that spark dialogue and inspire action. Stay connected with the news that shapes our world, only on News Talk on Samar News.
We're back, and wow, I'm still thinking about everything we talked about.
Yeah, me too.
It's crazy how fast things have changed.
Right.
And it's really hard to know what's going to happen next.
Absolutely.
One thing that really stands out to me is how different Trump's position is from past presidents.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
You know, both Democrats and Republicans have always supported Ukraine.
Yeah, pretty consistently.
They saw it as a key ally against Russia.
Right, a bulwark against Russian influence.
Exactly. So this shift in tone and policy from Trump,
It's a big deal.
it has everyone wondering what it means for the future of U.S. foreign policy.
Definitely.
Not just with Ukraine, but everywhere.
Exactly. It makes you wonder if the U.S. can be trusted to keep its promises.
Yeah, like, can our allies really count on us?
That's the question a lot of them are asking right now.
And this whole thing about Trump wanting to recoup the aid money through a minerals deal,
Yeah.
that just seems so strange to me.
It's definitely not the usual way of doing things.
Is there any example of this kind of thinking in international relations before?
Not really.
Like I said, it seems like he's treating foreign aid like it's the stock market or something.
Right. Historically, foreign aid has been a tool for diplomacy and strategic investment.
Mm-hmm.
It's about building relationships and making things more stable,
Right.
not about getting a direct payout.
So do you think this focus on recouping costs means the U.S. is changing how it sees its role in the world?
It might.
Like, what do you mean?
Some people think this shows that the U.S. is becoming more isolationist
Okay.
or more transactional,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Only wanting to be involved in things if there's a clear benefit for the U.S.
So basically less interested in being a global leader.
Potentially, yeah.
Less interested in promoting democracy around the world.
It's a big shift from how the U.S. has acted in the past.
A huge shift. And other countries are definitely watching this closely.
Oh, yeah. Both our allies and our adversaries.
Speaking of allies, the articles mentioned that European leaders are rallying around Ukraine.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it?
It seems like there might be a rift growing between the U.S. and Europe.
Yeah, it's possible.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, European leaders are emphasizing unity with Ukraine.
Okay.
They're taking a strong stance against Russia.
Mm-hmm.
But Trump seems to be doing his own thing.
Focused on personal relationships and economic gains.
Right.
So could this lead to Europe stepping up to fill the gap if the U.S. steps back?
It's definitely possible.
If the U.S. keeps distancing itself from its allies, it could create opportunities for other countries to step in.
Right, and take
Yeah.
on a bigger role in world affairs.
Wow, it's like we're seeing the whole balance of power shifting right in front of us.
I think you're right. It's a time of big changes and a lot of uncertainty.
And in the middle of all this, you have the people of Ukraine caught in this conflict.
Absolutely.
It makes you think about the real human cost of all this political back and forth.
Yeah, it's easy to get lost in the big picture discussions about geopolitics and foreign policy. But we can't forget that real people's lives are being deeply affected by these decisions.
I'm especially worried about what this aid freeze will mean for the Ukrainian people.
Yeah, it's a huge concern.
They need that support to protect themselves from Russia.
Right, and without it, their ability to resist Russia could be seriously weakened.
It could make Russia even more aggressive.
Absolutely.
And the conflict could drag on even longer.
Right, leading to more people dying and being displaced.
That's a scary thought.
It is.
So what do you think might happen next? What are some possible scenarios?
One possibility is that Trump keeps doing what he's doing.
And that would mean?
It could mean pushing allies away, strengthening Russia's position,
Why?
and potentially making the conflict in Ukraine even worse.
That's a really frightening thought.
It is.
Are there any other possibilities?
Well, maybe things will change.
How so?
Maybe there will be enough pressure from inside the U.S. or from other countries.
Okay.
Maybe Congress will step in and challenge Trump on the foreign aid issue.
Yeah.
Or maybe Trump will change his mind because of all the criticism he's getting.
So it seems like a lot depends on what Trump does next.
Yeah, a lot hinges on his decisions.
What are you paying attention to as we try to understand this whole situation?
I'm really interested to see how Congress reacts.
Yeah.
Will they try to limit Trump's power over foreign aid?
Uh-huh.
Or will they just go along with what he wants?
Right.
And his upcoming speech to Congress will be important, too.
What do you think he'll say?
Will he stick to his guns, or will he try to sound more conciliatory?
Good point.
Leaders all over the world will be listening closely to every word he says.
Trying to figure out what he's really thinking.
Exactly.
And what about Ukraine and Russia? How might they react to all of this?
I think Ukraine will keep asking for help from other countries.
Especially from their European allies.
Right. Especially if the U.S. aid stays frozen.
Makes sense.
And Russia might see this as a chance to take advantage of the situation.
Yeah.
Maybe they'll increase military pressure or do something else to destabilize things.
So basically, it seems like things could go in a lot of different directions.
That's right. From the conflict getting worse to maybe some kind of diplomatic solution.
But it's all really uncertain.
Yeah. Uncertainty is the name of the game right now.
It's both fascinating and really scary at the same time.
I agree.
So far, what's the biggest thing that stood out to you in all of this?
What's really hit home for me is that this isn't just about Ukraine.
What do you mean?
I mean, this situation shows us that there are much bigger changes happening in global politics.
Oh, I see.
The balance of power is shifting.
Yeah.
Old alliances are being questioned.
Uh-huh.
And there's a growing feeling of unease and instability in the world.
Yeah, I can definitely feel that.
It's a time of big transitions.
And it's a reminder that foreign policy isn't just some abstract idea.
Right.
It has a real impact on people's lives.
Absolutely. It affects us all in so many ways.
From how much we pay for gas to how safe our country is.
Exactly.
It's not enough to just read the headlines and move on.
Right. We need to really engage with these issues.
Yeah.
We need to try to understand how complicated they are.
Uh-huh.
And then we need to form our own opinions.
That's where the real power lies.
I think so.
As citizens, we have a voice.
We do.
And we need to use it to speak up for the kind of world we want.
Absolutely.
It's encouraging to think that even with these huge global challenges, we can still make a difference.
We just have to stay informed and stay engaged.
Well said. This has been a really thought-provoking conversation.
It has.
Thank you for sharing your expertise and helping us understand all of this.
You're welcome.
I hope our listeners will keep thinking about these issues, talking about them, and remember that even with all the uncertainty, we can still make a difference.
Absolutely. I hope so too.
News Talk on Samar News, your go-to podcast for the latest headlines and in-depth discussions. Join us as we unravel the stories that matter most, bringing you insightful commentary and expert analysis. Tune in for thought-provoking conversations that spark dialogue and inspire action. Stay connected with the news that shapes our world, only on News Talk on Samar News.
Okay, we're back. And honestly, this whole thing has left me with way more questions than answers.
Yeah, It's definitely a lot to take in.
We're at a really important point, not just for the U.S. and Ukraine, but
Right.
maybe for the whole world.
Absolutely.
It's fascinating.
Yeah, it really is.
It makes us think about what the U.S.'s role in the world is,
Yeah.
what alliances really mean,
Yeah.
and if the world is becoming more or less stable.
It's a pivotal moment for sure.
So we talked about different things that could happen.
Right.
Maybe the conflict gets worse.
Yeah.
Maybe there's some kind of diplomacy.
Uh-huh.
But what should we be looking for in the next few days or weeks that might tell us where things are going?
Well, a few things come to mind.
Okay. What are you watching?
First, how's Congress going to react to what Trump's doing?
Yeah. What are they going to do?
Will they try to control the foreign aid,
Okay.
or will they let the president do what he wants?
Right. Their response could really change things.
Absolutely.
And what about Trump's speech to Congress?
Yeah, that's another big one.
Do you think he'll explain things more or maybe even change his approach a little?
It's hard to say.
I mean, will he keep going the way he is?
Right.
Or will he try to smooth things over?
That's the question.
Leaders everywhere will be paying attention to every word he says.
Trying to read between the lines.
Yeah, trying to figure out what he's really going to do.
Absolutely.
So we've got Congress and the president to watch, but what about Ukraine and Russia?
Yeah.
How might they react to all this?
Well, I think Ukraine's going to keep asking for help from other countries.
Okay.
They'll be emphasizing that they need to be independent,
Makes sense.
and they'll be looking to Europe for support.
Especially if the U.S. aid stays frozen. And what about Russia?
Well, they might try to take advantage of this whole situation.
Yeah.
Maybe they'll ramp up their military actions
Oh.
or do something else to cause trouble.
So things could get even more unstable.
It's definitely a risk.
It's crazy to think that all of this could escalate so quickly.
Yeah, it's a tense situation.
What's really interesting to me is how this whole thing has shown us how divided people are.
Yeah.
Not just between countries,
Uh-huh.
but even within the U.S.
Absolutely.
We're seeing such different opinions on how to deal with Russia,
Yeah.
on foreign aid,
Right.
and even on what it means for America to be a leader in the world.
It's really highlighted some fundamental disagreements.
These disagreements have always been there,
They have?
but this crisis has really brought them to the surface.
Absolutely.
So what does all this mean for us?
Yeah, for everyday people trying to understand what's going on in the world.
How do we even make sense of all this?
It's tough. But I think the first step is realizing that foreign policy isn't something that happens far away.
It's not just something we read about in the news.
Right. It affects our lives in so many ways.
Yeah.
It affects the prices we pay for things. It affects how safe we feel.
So we can't just ignore it.
We can't. It's too important.
So we need to really pay attention to these issues.
Yes, we need to understand how complex they are.
And we need to form our own opinions about what's right and wrong.
Exactly. That's where our power lies.
As citizens, we have a voice.
We do, and we need to use it.
We need to speak up for the kind of world we want to live in.
Absolutely.
It's a little bit hopeful to think that
Yeah.
even with all the crazy stuff happening in the world,
Yeah.
we can still make a difference.
We can.
This whole situation with Ukraine is scary.
It is.
And it's really complicated.
Yeah,
But it's also a chance for us to think about what we believe in,
absolutely.
about the kind of world we want,
Yeah,
and about what we can do to make that world a reality.
that's a great way to put it.
This has been a really eye-opening deep dive.
It has been fascinating.
Thank you so much for sharing your insights with us.
You're very welcome.
I hope our listeners will keep learning about these issues,
Me too.
keep talking about them.
Yeah.
And remember that even when things feel uncertain, we can still make a difference.
We can, and we should.
Thanks for joining us, everyone. That's it for this deep dive.
Thanks for having me.